Hello, my friends. Rob Roselli coming to you once again on the Not Fox News Network. Today being Thursday, April 13th, 2017. And again, the website boxofsunglasses.com. Email info@boxofsunglasses.com. Twitter @Rob Roselli. Facebook Rob Roselli1. Okay. And just to reiterate, what we've been doing the past several shows is going through Matthew 24, which seems to be a favorite amongst so-called prophecy scholars, oft misrepresented and misquoted, as is par for the course for most so-called prophecy experts and prophecy scholars. A lot of these guys, in case you haven't noticed, I do not hold in high regard. They don't know what they're talking about. There's some comment in there. There's some genuinely misled people. But be that as it may, a lot of them are just wrong. Okay, and don't forget, looking into this, three basic biblical principles that are at play here, at least as far as I'm concerned, is number one is obviously the Bible is the foundation of everything. Certainly the show and the core of the quote conspiracy. You can't wrap your hands around it. You can't figure it out. It doesn't make sense without that. Okay, and number two is Israel is not God's chosen people. All right, I'm not Israel bashing. It's just such horrible biblical theology. It just doesn't make any sense. And we did go through that, remember, on the last show. And by the way, the shows are posted. If you go on boxofsunglasses.com, you can look up the archives and go by date. So when I say the last show, I'm talking the April 11th show, which should post on my YouTube channel. And the link, again, is on the opening page of the website. But anyway, getting back, Israel, it's just they're not God's chosen people. I mean, I don't know how much clearer that can be made in certain lines of the old, just about the whole Old New Testament, and really most of the New Testament. So really, to say that, you really have to ignore pretty much 95% of the Bible. You just start in Genesis chapter 12, and God promises Abraham, you shall be the sand of the sea, and you skip all the way to, like, I don't know, the last part of Revelation. I hope there's God's chosen people. I mean, Jesus asking the Pharisees, the representatives of the Jews, how you can escape being condemned to hell in Matthew 23, as we discussed the other night. I mean, I don't know how you missed that or misinterpret that. But anyway, that's the number two. And the number three, that segues into, there's no doubt that the United States is the Mystery Babylon of Revelation 17. There's no doubt in my mind, and that's spelled out again, Mystery Babylon USA, on my website, boxofsunglasses.com. So, just getting back the other night to just review, basically, Matthew, we made it up to, I think it was verse 15, okay, and we talked about stone temples and what's really meant by stone temples, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And I mentioned one of the most high-level Freemasons, most highly regarded as a former Confederate general, United States Civil War Confederate general by the name of Albert Pike. Okay, and in some sources, I've seen it in a couple of different sources, have him as one of the Grand Masters or founders or some high-level or bigwig in the Ku Klux Klan, which probably makes sense when you look at the American, the forerunners to the American progressive elites, the Darwinists. A lot of the so-called, the Democratic Party was pro-slavery party, and if you look at what they're doing with welfare here of the Great Society, they still kind of are the party of slavery. But anyway, so it would make sense that Albert Pike, who would be a modern-day elitist American white liberal Democrat, would be mixed up with the Ku Klux Klan. But be that as it may, he did write a book called Morals and Dogma, just to illustrate. Okay, this is something called what he's calling the Ashlar Cube, or the World State, and I'm going to explain this real quick. He's saying this is what you're building towards. Okay, the rough ashlar is the people as a mass, rude and organized. The perfect ashlar or cubicle stone, symbol of perfection, is the state. Okay, and he just goes into the whole thing about it. But this, not to go on the whole thing on Albert Pike and what he really, his Freemasons and all that. But the point is that that's the stone that the builders rejected. Okay, has become the head of the corner. Okay, you can read about that in Matthew 21, and then of course, we went through Matthew 23 the other night. But this is the kind of language that Jesus is really talking about. He's talking about the temple in Jerusalem, Solomon's temple, will be knocked down, and not one stone will be left upon another. He doesn't really care that much about a physical stone temple, especially Herod's temple, okay, in Jerusalem. So there's obviously a much bigger picture, and we went through that, and just by virtue of the fact that right after that the disciples ask him, what will be the signs of your second coming and the end of the world. Okay, that's in 24 verse 3. So obviously it's alluding to the end of the world. Okay, so it's alluding to this perfect state, or perfect society, this perfect cube, spoken of by Albert Pike. Now it's very interesting, okay, because this is my second book, okay, The Un-American Genocidal Complex, and this is how it's all being achieved. Now we've gone through this. Robert Christian, representative of the Rosicrucians, or the British Royal Society, which we talked about. It's a pseudonym for the guy that founded these, the Georgia Guidestones, the anti-Ten Commandments, which call for an elimination of 90% of the world's population, amongst other things that would make up the so-called world state. Of course, a lot of it is being run right out of here, the United Nations, here in Mystery Babylon or New York City. Okay, but it's very interesting, talking about the Ashlar Cube, is this 322 number, okay, the number of skull and bones, the Eastern Establishment, the American Illuminati, okay, I call it the Un-American Genocidal Complex, okay, founders of Hitler, the Darwinists, the Albert Pike, white liberal, Democrat, okay, elitists, okay, which are still in existence today, but anyway, the 322 right here of skull and bones, okay, representative of the real shadow government, okay. What's interesting about that is that in the way the Ashlar Cube is described, and I'm just going on what the Freemasons say, okay, it starts off as a point of 3, okay, it's just a point of the beginning, okay, and that would be the Father, the Mother, and the Son. That's the 3-4-5 of the 3-4-5 triangle, which was highly venerated in ancient Egypt way before Pythagoras, the so-called Pythagorean theorem, discovered it. Okay, the Egyptians were very highly advanced. And I'm going to go off on that tangent right now, but I'll go off a little bit, but don't forget, this is another, remember, the phallus of Osiris, Apollo, Nimrod, the eye of Apollo, Osiris, Nimrod, okay, right here. We talked about this, okay, right on top of your Federal Reserve note, St. John's Divine Cathedral. Talk about your stone temples that are going to be knocked down right here with the same capless Pyramid of Giza on it, okay. First book, They Live, Great Society of the Undead. So there's another version of the stone temple, but the 322 is very interesting again, because you have the 3. This is how it's described. You start off with a point, okay, 3-4-5 as 1, okay. So it's 1 point, okay, but it's equal to 3 because you have 3 entities involved. Again, the Father, which would be Lucifer, the wife, which would be Eve, okay, or Isis, going all the way back to the Garden of Eden, with the female goddess, and then those two get together, and they have this son, okay, which would be the 5, which connects the hypotenuse of the 3-4-5 triangle, and the 5, of course, is a highly venerated number amongst the Freemasons, philosophers like Plato, and it should be just the number of the pentagram, okay, which would be the representative of the horned god, okay, known as Pan or Pandemonium or Dionysus, or Apollyon of Revelation chapter 9. Okay, so you can see what's swirling around here. But anyway, so that's your point. Your number 1 point is 3. Now around the 3, you get the world cross. Okay, if you picture, now we're making a cube here, so picture 4 squares, okay, lined up in the vertical, and 2 squares lined up in the horizontal. Okay, that's your world cross. Okay, and on that, now you got 6. Okay, you got 6 squares. Okay, and we're making a cube here, so now you got 7 pieces. Okay, and then you fold those up, and there's 12 vertices. Okay, if you picture a cube, when you fold up those 6 sides, remember you got 2 on the side; those are coming up, and then you got the 4. So you got the 1 on the bottom, then you fold up the other 4, and it's a perfect cube, right? So now you got the 3, you got the point in the middle, you got the 6 faces, so you got 7. Okay, and then you got 12 vertices. Okay, because if you just imagine a cube, a square, okay, it's going to have 12 vertices connecting all the corners, right? So you got 3 plus 7 plus 12. So what does that mean? What does that add up to? 322. Okay, so there it is. All right, this is basic stuff to the Freemasons. Okay, this isn't conspiracy theory. It's just, you know, the Brotherhood of Death right here. Again, it's another name for the American Illuminati, or Skull and Bones. Ties directly into this perfect ashlar, this perfect cube, as called out by the Freemasons and the Georgia Guidestones, induced by the god of chaos, Shiva, or Pan. Okay, now Shiva is the Indian god of chaos and rebirth. So what is that? You know, again, what is that chaos is the impending World War III that we see right before us here in April 2017. And of course, after the decks declared of 90% of humanity, the elites, the remaining 10%, get to hide in their deep underground military bunkers and reoccupy the whole place. That's their plan under their god Lucifer. I mean, that's the core of the quote conspiracy right there. I mean, in the last, if you're listening or you're hoping to come by this in the last 15 minutes, that's everything. It's a Cliff Notes version of the quote conspiracy. Okay, it's all laid out in Matthew 24. Okay, this concept of the stone temple. Okay, remember, just to review it, we saw it in here. Okay, another version of it. Okay, is right here. U.S. News and World Report. Okay, you know, here's just an example. Here's the great architect of the universe, you know, the god of the Freemasons, or Lucifer, or Satan, the sun, you know, with his compass. Okay, this is basic stuff to the Freemasons. Okay, and don't forget what we talked about. Remember, we talked about the invisible college, or the Rosicrucians, the rose plus the cross. Okay, the British Royal Society, Freemasons, Knights Templar. You know, this lined right through to the British Roundtable groups, the American Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, and of course the American Illuminati, known as Skull and Bones, or what I call the Un-American Genocidal Complex, or what people now are calling the Deep State, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, genocidal maniacs and devil-worshipping psychopaths, all with no exceptions. Okay, so anyway, that's kind of the background. So, you know, we talked about false prophets and ascended masters and all this other sort of thing, but let's just jump right in here and, you know, into. I mean, we concluded the other night with the abomination of desolations. Now, this is the one spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Now, this is where a lot of these so-called prophecy scholars go off the rails, if they haven't already. And they say, well, the abomination of, you know, the language here is very specific. It says, when you shall see the abomination of desolation. And remember, the disciples, they couldn't see Judas being indwelt by Satan. Okay, he left, he got up. Jesus knew who he was. Okay, Satan knew who he was, but the disciples didn't, so they couldn't see the abomination of desolation, which was the Jews making a covenant or a deal with the devil, literally. Okay, remember, at the end of Matthew 23, Jesus concludes, "Oh, your house shall be left unto you desolate. Your house, your temple, I'm out of here." And something has to fill that vacuum. And what filled that vacuum, of course, was Satan indwelling Judas Iscariot. Okay, and that's in John 12 and John 13. Okay, and Matthew, I want to say 27. Okay, where you read about that. But be that as it may, that's your abomination of desolation, I believe. That's when it happened. And does it line up with the time frames in Daniel? Yeah, if you don't take those dates literally, like you're not supposed to. Okay, numbers in the Bible are, you know, if they're meant to be taken literally, which is very rare, there's a much bigger symbolic meaning behind the number. Okay, for example, in I think it's Matthew chapter 18, you know, Peter comes up to Jesus and says, you know, how many times shall we forgive our, you know, those that do us wrong? And, you know, Jesus says, well, Peter asked him 7 times, and Jesus says, no, 70 times 7 times. So obviously that's 70 times 7 is 490, so obviously that's a symbolic response. Jesus didn't mean for somebody to carry around some kind of scorecard or something and write down every time somebody, you forgive somebody 491st time, and then you let them have it. That's ridiculous, okay? Or the 153 fish discussed in John chapter 22. Yeah, there was 153 fish captured, but there's a significance. There's a lot of significance to that number. It's a very specific number, and it's in there for a reason. Symbolic, again. Okay. So you can see that Jesus uses numbers just like Albert Pike and the Freemasons, as we've just discussed. So, and actually, the real meaning of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is a play on numbers. Okay, and a lot of so-called biblical scholars, that say that the tree of knowledge of good and evil was a literal tree of fruit that was meant to be eaten. They're just wrong. They're not right, and you can read about that in Matthew 16, where Jesus says, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, okay, or the doctrine. Even the disciples asked, well, we're supposed to be born no physical bread. And Jesus says, no, you dummies. I said, beware of the doctrine of the Pharisees. So that sends you all the way back to Genesis chapter 3. When God says, you shall not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay? It's a study of numbers. It's that simple, the tree of life. Okay? Let's see if I can find it in here. This is the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Just looking through here. There's a bunch of pentagrams, by the way. I mentioned the number 5 before. This is the foundation, one of the foundations of the New Age movement. Okay. But be that as it may, here's your tree of life. Okay, your serpent climbing your tree of life. Okay, here's your Kabbalah, the study of numbers. This is the foundation of the Jewish Kabbalah, which is why God called them spiritual fornicators or whores all throughout the Old Testament, because they were up to things like this. But just look at this, okay? You got the serpent climbing what they're calling the tree of life. Okay, so there it is. There's your tree of knowledge of good and evil right there. Okay, 10 numbers, 22 branches, 3 columns, 322. Not an accident, 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Okay, 322, the Ashlar cube. Okay, so it was all this starting to fit together. You see why I consider many of these boobs, these con men on these so-called Christian channels don't know what the hell they're talking about. Okay, when they skip over all the stuff and go right to physical Israel, they have no idea what they're talking about. None. All right. So let's go here. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. So again, this is right after when you shall see the abomination of desolation, when he shall reveal himself, and it becomes so obvious that Satan is running the world and everybody knows it. Okay, when that happens, there's not much time left. It doesn't say exactly how much time. In my opinion, we have seen it. Okay, at least I have. That's Pharaoh Barry, 44th president of the United States. The man from nowhere, the man with no birth certificate, just so happens to be number 44, which just so happens to represent the Horus, or the son of the male and female in ancient Egypt. His number is 44. Okay, so you think the people running this world and this country are playing some kind of sick jokes on us? Well, they are. And Trump, the now neocon Trump, the cruise missile throwing Trump, the letdown. What a letdown. He collapsed fast. He's going to be the one that's going to bring in World War III, this chaos I was talking about before. But be that as it may, his predecessor, Pharaoh Barry, who set himself up between the column of male and the female, the Jacob and Boaz columns at the 2008 Democratic National Convention, just like these two, the representative of the Temple of Zeus, this column in the middle, there's your son of God, there's your female, kind of cut off here, your male, your son, your 3, your 4, your 5. Okay, it's all right here. So by Obama setting himself up between the 2 columns of the Temple of Zeus, he's representing himself as God, as the Son of God, just like Pharaoh was in the Old Testament, in the book of Exodus. Okay, so now you can understand why God killed the firstborn of all the Egyptians, and especially singing out Pharaoh's son. Now, hopefully, that starts to make a lot more sense. I'm starting to the picture's starting to kind of form here. Okay. So anyway, so he's telling flee into the mountains. In other words, get out. Again, it's not a literal mountain. Okay. If you go back to Isaiah chapter 2, and people shall flow up into the mountain. Okay. In Matthew 5, a city on a hill cannot be hid. Okay. Obviously, he's talking about the New Jerusalem that the Apostle Paul is talking about in Galatians 4, not the physical Jerusalem. Again, another example of why, the Jews as God's chosen people is complete nonsense. Okay, so this is a spiritual fleeing. Okay, it's going to manifest in the physical world, of course. Okay, but right now, this is what's figuratively at play as we get close to the end here. God's saying, run away from this stuff. Of course, physically can't get up this mountain right now on this earth, but spiritually you sure can, and that's what this is alluding to here. Let him which is on the housetop not come down and take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. Okay, now this is a very interesting. This next verse here, verse 19, is a very interesting verse. Okay, and woe to them that are with child, and them that give suck in those days. Okay, so what's Jesus talking about there? Is he gonna? Now, if you're a biblical literalist, you'll say, well, if you're pregnant and it's the end times, you're gonna die. Woe unto you. When Jesus says woe, that's pretty much condemning you to hell. Okay. If you go anywhere you see the word woe, W-O-E, and that's used plenty of times by Jesus himself at the end of Matthew 23. I can't emphasize that enough, but when he says woe unto Judas, when he's at the Last Supper and he's saying, woe unto him that betray me, it would be better if he had not been born. So Judas, who sold himself out to Satan for 30 pieces of silver, as well as God's so-called chosen people that paid him the 30 pieces of silver, it's woe unto them. That's not a good... That's really bad. Okay, that's at Revelation 9. You see, woe, woe, woe. There's 3 woes. Okay, as part of the 7th seal that represent the 7 trumpets of the 7 seals. Okay, we'll get into that on a future show, but that's a very bad. It's very bad. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. But here he's saying, woe unto them that are with child, and them that give suck in those days. Now, what Jesus is referring to is a spiritual fornication. He's referring to the children of Satan. Okay, now you have the female whore goddess Isis or Diana. Okay, or the 4 we just talked about. The rose is the male, remember the cross is the female. Okay, the whore of Babylon, Eve. Okay, the original is representative of the I'm not being anti-woman, okay, because Adam sinned too. He's part of the deal, but I'm just talking from a biblical standpoint, that's what Jesus is really referring to here. He's saying, if you're a child of the devil, as per John chapter 8, okay, ye are of your father the devil. This is, you're spiritually wasted. You're part of it. You're an offspring of the whore of Babylon. That's what he's talking about here. That's the language that's being that's at play here. Okay, I think it's Isaiah 59. We can go there real quick. And read up on this. Okay. Now this is where Jesus is he's going through, God's so-called chosen people. Okay. And he's talking about the whore of Babylon. Okay. And this is really all through the book of Isaiah, and really in the book of Hosea too. I mean, when Hosea marries, Gomer, and that's really, if you read the book of Hosea, that's really, it's representative of a spiritual fornication. Okay. Here it is. It's Isaiah chapter 54, but this is verse 1. Sing, O barren, thou that didst not bear, break forth into singing, and cry aloud, thou that didst not travail with child, for more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife, saith the Lord. So what's he talking about there? Again, this relates to Galatians 4, for example, where he's talking about two different mothers or two Jerusalems. Jerusalem being the mother of us all, the Jerusalem above being the mother, the spiritual Jerusalem, okay, the wife, the bride of Christ that he talks about in Matthew 9. Okay, the virgin as represented by the Virgin Mary. Okay, not the Catholic Virgin Mary, okay, the so-called Queen of Heaven. Okay, that's nothing more than Artemis or Isis or the female the whore of Babylon we were just talking about. The Catholic Church is a big part, a big chunk of the pie of the world whore of Babylon. But just, Jesus' mother, the Virgin Mary, okay, is what that's referring to. Now, she's barren, okay, and she has children, born-again believers. Remember, John chapter 3, Nicodemus talking to Jesus, he must be born again. And Jesus, my mothers won't be born again. He says, no, spiritually born again. This is the language that's being discussed here. And this is the language in Matthew 24, okay? So again, Jesus isn't going to condemn a woman to hell because she's pregnant when the time's finally up. That's ridiculous, all right? But what he's talking about is this language right here in the book of Hosea and Isaiah 54, and then throughout the Old Testament, the most pronounced, the most blatant discussion, borderline pornographic, is Ezekiel 23, talking about a Aholah and a Holabad. I think one is Samaria, or the northern kingdom of Israel. The other one's Jerusalem or Judah. The two southern tribes. He's basically calling them whore sisters. Okay. Or Ezekiel, I think it's 17, and God basically says, you're so stupid, Judah and Israel. I mean, you're whores. Not only are you whores, you're so stupid. Instead of your lovers paying you, you pay your lovers. That's how disgusted he is with, his so-called chosen people, okay? But remember the Ten Commandments, all right? Go back, God says, you shall love the God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Okay, I will reward my believers to 1,000 generations, 1,000 representing obviously infinity. But he says, I will punish the third and fourth generation. Okay, so this is the generations of Satan himself. Okay, so if you go to Matthew, the opening chapter of Matthew, and there's 42 generations. Okay, and there's 3 groups of 14 generations. It's 42. So, in other words, if you're a born-again believer, you're part of that virgin. You're part of this married wife. Okay, the true bride of Christ. Okay, the Jerusalem from above, Galatians 4. Okay, you're part of that. You're born again. But if you're part of the human race, the Jewish Kabbalah, Freemason crowd, then your mother is the whore of Babylon. Okay, you're called desolate. Okay, of course there's physical birth, but you're called desolate in God's eyes. Okay, the abomination of desolation. Okay, it's just starting to make sense now. Mystery Babylon. Okay, the whore of Babylon in Revelation 17. Hopefully this is starting to kind of sink in here. Okay, but this is the language. Okay, if you go back and read it, let's just get the exact language. Just while we're on the subject here, this is the second commandment. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers, okay, upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, okay? So think about that, okay? And we just got, one of the prime numbers of Freemasons. I mean, 5 is a big number, obviously, in honor of their god Pan, or Dionysus, or Bacchus, or Shiva, okay, the pentagram, okay, 5-pointed star, okay, but also 7, Okay, there's 7 chakras of the human body. There's 7 subjects that Freemasons study. I think it's English, grammar, rhetoric. I don't remember 7 of them. I can think of them, but 7 planets, the 7 visible planets. Okay, the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the Moon. Okay, all representing the 7 metals of alchemy. Okay, Sun being gold, Mercury being Mercury, obviously Venus I think is copper, Mars is, I forget what Mars is, lead maybe, Saturn is tin, whatever the numbers, but there's 7 metals of alchemy. Okay, so the point is the 7 is a very important number to the Freemasons. Okay, so think about that. Okay, so visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children of the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me. So what does that mean? It's the 43rd generation. Jesus was born, he's generation 42. Okay, so if you're not born again, you're not part of the 42nd generation, that means you're part of this 43rd or this 3rd and 4th generation. That means you're a child of the whore of Babylon, okay, or the desolate woman, okay. Again, that's the language of Matthew 24, all right. Nothing to do with physical Israel. Well, it does, because they're in the middle of this whole mess, acting as the whore of Babylon. Okay, so you don't want to be sending money to Israel. You don't want to be sending money to these jokers on the these so-called Christian channels with their stupid the Star of David singing these ridiculous Jewish whatever, venerating the Israel. Anyway, so that's your what's really going on here. Okay, again, just to recap. Right, what was it? Verse 19. Okay, woe unto them that have a child, and them that give suck in those days. And let's just read one more. Then he says, but pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. So what does that mean? Okay, again, God doesn't give out times. He doesn't give out dates. People that try and set exact dates, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. I think we've beaten that horse to death. Okay. Yeah, there's signs of the times. You can see trends. You can see things aligning as now. But to sit here and set a specific date, the ones that set dates are the Freemasons. Okay, they're in love with dates. For example, an interesting one that we talked about is May 1st, or May Day. Okay, which is parentheses, is something to keep in mind as we rapidly approach May 1st. Okay, look for the weirdos, the New Age weirdos, these anarchists to try and pull a stunt. It's World Workers' Day, it's World Socialist Day, it's May Day, it's the first day of May in honor of the or Babylon goddess Maya. Okay, I think she's another one of the names for Isis, or the mother of Hermes. Okay, M-A-I-A, after which the month of May is named. So it's a big day. Foundation of the Illuminati. Okay, the Bavarian Illuminati, which gave us, of course, the European Illuminati, which gave us, of course, the American Illuminati, known as Skull and Bones, or the 322 crew we were talking about a half hour ago. Okay. So, it says, pray ye that your flight be not in the winter. Okay. That means summer's over. Harvest time is over. Jesus he's gathered his wheat into his barn. Okay, this is explained very clearly by John the Baptist in Matthew 3. Alright. So when winter is here, that means there's no harvest. Nothing's being harvested. Okay, and that means that Satan is really on the loose in the 5-month, what I believe is a 5-month Great Tribulation. That's your Great Tribulation. Alright, it's not this ridiculous 7-year thing with, Noah's idiots talking about a pre-trib or post-trib or a mid-tribulation rapture. Got news for these morons, okay? Jesus himself said, way back in year 33, when he was crucified, he said, in the world you will have tribulation, but be glad I have overcome the world. So right from the get-go, the disciples were experiencing the tribulation. Okay, they're experiencing tribulation, but then there will be an accelerated, or when he says there will be tribulation, okay, right in the next verse, he said, then shall there be great tribulation. That's what he's referring to. Okay, that's the wrath of God right there. That's the sixth seal. All right, let's just get right to it. Okay, it's not some ridiculous nonsense that these so-called scholars are talking about. All right, but let's just get back to this. You know, your flight's not in the winters. In other words, remember, I think it's in Revelation 11, or it says he sends out his angels to reap. Okay, again, he's reaping his wheat, or his believers. Okay, he's saving them, and there will be maybe a rapture event right before the end. A few people might get cleared out on that, but for most Christians, especially here in America, it's going to suck. All right, don't think you're sitting in Hal Lindsey's or John Hagee's church. You're going to get flown out of here, on a whim just because you're sitting there. Then after the Great Tribulation, then Israel's going to join you or some nonsense, whatever these bozos are saying. It's just not going to work out like that. All right. So, in other words, if you're running away, if you're part of that sixth seal crowd that says, protect us from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath has come, praying to the mountains to fall on them, it's over. That's winter, okay? The season, the harvest season, the figurative harvest season is over. Okay, that's the language there. And then it says, neither on the Sabbath day. Now, the Sabbath day is a day of rest, okay? But if you read about what that really means, it's in the book of Hebrews. It's a rest from all the pomp and circumstance and trying to do works to save your soul, like the Jews of the Old Testament were doing. And God was having you go through and all the procedures and the building of the temple and the curtains and all this and all that. That all goes away. Okay, that's the rest that's being talked about here, the Sabbath day. That's really what's it's usual. It's a small physical picture with a much larger symbolic picture behind it. But again, this is the Sabbath day. This is the day of rest. This is the day you're supposed to be saved. Okay, this is it. Okay, the window's open right now. But what Matthew is saying here is that if you're running from God on this day, then you got problems. Okay, you're done. Okay. Again, this alludes to maybe Matthew chapter 12. It says, know that the kingdom of God has come upon you. Okay. So Jesus is saying, I'm here. I'm the kingdom of God. You believe me, you become born again. You're good. If you don't, if you reject me like they did, then in a sense, it's the Sabbath day. It's the Sabbath rest. And this is in the book of Hebrews. Okay. Let's say Hebrews chapter 4, but I don't remember the exact chapter off the top of my head right now. But if it talks about what the Sabbath rest really is. Okay. And as I just described it, so again, if you're not right with God, you're not running to him, you're not running up the mountain like we just talked about a couple of verses back, or Isaiah chapter 2, or I think Micah chapter 4 is another good one that describes the concept of a mountain. Matthew 5, as we discussed, okay. A lighted city on a hill cannot be hid. Okay, the New Jerusalem, the Jerusalem from above, Galatians chapter 4. Whatever you want to, but if you're not running to that mountain, like right now in a figurative sense, you're getting away from this wrath that's coming, and you're running away on the Sabbath day, you're a non-believer. Okay, you didn't take Jesus up on his offer, then you got problems. Okay, that's the language here. So, and then, just to cap it off, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be. So that's God's wrath. Again, I don't know how else to say it. Okay. Yeah, there's tribulation now, but it's a temporary tribulation for believers. It's a tribulation of the world. Whatever, that's been going on for 2,000 years, but, there should be a great tribulation. That's not the great tribulation. It's not this idiocy of this, 7 year, and this post-trib and this pre-trib and all this nonsense that the so-called, no, it's the wrath of God, okay? That's plain and simple, right? That's the tribulation. And I believe, that's 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, is I believe where we can just illustrate this, and we'll close with this. This talks about the wrath of God, okay? Now he's talking about the Jews here. Again, God's so-called chosen people who both killed the Lord Jesus and their own prophets and have persecuted us, and they please not God and are contrary of all men, forbidding us to speak to the Gentiles. In other words, trying to prevent us from creating children of God, okay, or born-again believers. This is the Jews, God's so-called chosen people. So after they had Jesus executed, making a deal with the devil, this is the Apostle Paul, who was part of the Jews, but was converted to a born-again believer out of physical Israel, forbidding us to speak to the Gentiles that they might be saved, to fill up their sins, for the wrath is come upon them to the uttermost. The wrath has come upon them to the uttermost. Okay, this is the Great Tribulation. Okay, that's really what Paul is talking about there. Okay, it's just that simple. I don't know how else to say it. Okay, it's just that simple. Okay, there's a wrath or a great tribulation, and that's it. Okay, that's it. End of story. Rob Roselli, boxofsunglasses.com. Most Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Archives on the website. Good night and God bless.